Panama city leaders also approved new guidelines for special community events. The handbook lays out everything organizers need, from application deadlines and fees to permit rules, public safety, traffic control, sanitation, insurance, and cleanup afterwards. One big change: the city would switch from a simple small or large event system to a tiered classification based on size, complexity, and impact on city resources. The updates would also allow the city manager to approve qualifying events and request temporary state road closures from FDOT, cutting down on how often events have to go before the commission.